Case versus if. What's the difference? In this tip, I'm going to explain the difference between a case statement and an if-then statement, as well as the typical use cases for using one or the other. Hello everybody, my name's Andy. I'm the founder of VizWiz.com. I created this channel to help you become great at Tableau. If you like what you're seeing, please give it a like, and don't forget to click subscribe. I post new videos every week. Let's get started. Before we get to case statements, let's look at the two different types of if statements. We have IIF and we have if-then statements. Let's look at a simple example. We want to know if a region is in the east. To do that, we're going to create a new calculated field. Let's call this East Region Sales. Over here in my functions list, I'm going to look at logical calculations. If I click on IIF, we can see that it says IIF, the test, so this is a Boolean, a yes or a no, or a true or a false. What happens when it's true, and what happens when it's false. So let's say IIF, parentheses, region equals east, so this is my test. When it's true, I want to bring back sales. When it's false, I want to bring back 0. And then a close parentheses. Let's click on OK. And if we drag region to the rows, you'll see I have 4 regions. And if I drag my East region sales to text, you can see I have sales for the East region and 0 for everything else. So an IIF statement is great when you just have one condition you want to check. If we were to write this as an if-then statement, I would create a new calculated field, and let's call it East region sales if-then. To rewrite that IIF statement as an if-then, I'm going to say if region equals east, then sales, else 0, end. Click on OK, and let's drag that onto the table as well, and you can see we get the same results. In this case though, since there's only 2 outcomes, true or false, I would typically stick with an IIF statement. An IIF statement is definitely simpler to write, but many users aren't familiar with an IIF statement. In that situation, stick with an if-then statement. If-then statements are definitely the choice to use when you have multiple selections to check. Let's say we want to look at a nested calculation. In this case, I'm going to look at whether the region is the central or the east. I'm going to create a new calculated field. I'm going to call this East or Central Sales if-then. So if the region is equal to central, then sales, else if the region is equal to east, then sales, else 0, end. Let's click on OK, and if we drag that onto the measure value shelf, you'll see we now get sales for the central as well. I'm going to duplicate this calculation and see what happens if we don't specify anything in the else part of the statement. Let's duplicate the field, edit the copy, and so that you remember what this is doing later on, I'm going to call this if-then without else. So in this case, I'm just going to get rid of this else statement. Click on OK, drag that new field onto the measure value shelf, and now we get nulls because we didn't specify anything in the else part of the statement. Personally, I think case statements are simpler, less prone to mistakes, and definitely require less typing. Let's see how we do these same examples, but with a case statement. I'm going to create a new calculated field, and I'm going to call it case statement. I'm going to use the word case, and over here on the right hand side we can see how it's supposed to be configured. It finds the first value that matches the expression and returns the corresponding value. So for example, I want to check the region field. So I'm going to say case region. When the region is east, then I want to return sales. When the region is central, then I want to return sales. Else, I want to return 0, end. Now note that case statements can only compare strings. Let's click on OK, drag that field to the measure value shelf, and you'll see we get the same result as this column here. Okay, so let's duplicate that field. Let's edit the copy, and let's see what happens when we get rid of the else. Click on OK. Let's drag that copy to the measure value shelf, and you'll see now we get the same thing as this if-then without else. Let's look at one more example. I'm going to create a new calculated field, and in this example I want to return sales if it's the East region, and I want to return profit if it's the central region. So I'm going to call this sales or profit. If I were to write this as an if statement, I would write if region equals east, then sales, else if region equals central, then profit, end. So I'm going to return a null if it's any other region. Click on OK, and let's drag that to the measure value shelf. And notice now, we get profit for the central region. Let's try to write this as a case statement. Let's write a new calculated field, and I'm going to call this sales or profit case. Again, I'm going to check it against the region. So case region, when east, then sales, when central, then profit, end. Click on OK. Let's drag that field to the measure value shelf. And there we go, we see the same result. So really, if you're more comfortable with if-then statements, go ahead and use those. But case statements can be much simpler when you're trying to compare the values of a single dimension. One of the main differences is that an if statement checks booleans, in other words, whether the condition is true or false, whereas case statements can only compare strings. Let's look at an example of when a case statement cannot be used and you can only use an if-then statement. I'm going to write a new calculated field, and I'm going to call this one comparison to measure. Let's try to write this as a case statement. In this example, let's say we want to return sales greater than 100. If I try to write this as a case statement, I might write case sales, and when I say when greater than 100, then high sales, else low sales, end. Notice I get an error message. Remember, we can only use the case statement for strings, and this is trying to do a comparison to a number. So I would have to rewrite this as an if statement. So I'm going to say if sales is greater than 100, then high sales, else low sales, end. I can drag that to the rows, and now we see each region is split up by high sales or low sales. So here's my general rule of thumb. When I want to check values within a discrete field, then I'll always start with a case statement. When I want to compare to a single value, I'll use an IIF statement. When I need to check multiple values, I'll use an if statement. When I need to check a condition, like a greater than or less than, then I have to use an if statement. I hope you found this useful. If you did, please give it a like, and don't forget to click subscribe. And better yet, share it with somebody that you think might find it useful as well.